I had fun comparing him to Crassus, who lost the Battle of Carrhae in 53 BC when the Romans lost against the Parthians. And after that, the famous story that the Parthians put a lot of gold in his mouth before no during when he was dead. And of course, this was a Roman overextension, and a very rich guy in Rome thinking that he could go there and win against the Persians at the time, and he got kicked pretty badly. So that was the playful part of the story, comparing Crassus with Trump. But the biggest hit is the desperation that he found himself in when he looked at the numbers in terms of the depletion of the strategic reserves of oil of the United States. And I received some of these numbers from one of the old school deep state sources, and he was explaining in detail in a very long email that essentially we were in mid-June, so this was a few days ago. When Trump looked at the numbers, he saw that by mid-August, this would be the absolute limit for the depletion of the strategic reserves. And from one day to another, the price of oil would skyrocket, inflation in the US would skyrocket, and it would be a total mess. And that should have been the number one reason for him to desperately cling to the MOU or a deal. But this, Nima, explains the situation between now, mid-August, a little bit before the midterms and all that. After the midterms, depending on what happens, all bets are off. And it's this information or series of rumors is already circulating in Washington that he will be back to war after the midterms. And it's very, very plausible, credible, and considering the egomaniac narcissist in question, ultra plausible, right? So he's buying time. He's buying time between now, we are in late June, to August, all the way to late October, the midterms in November, and after that. And obviously, Nima, as you know very well, people in Iran, the leadership in Iran is fully prepared for it. They have no illusions. And they have no illusions that the Americans are going to follow the deliberations or the suggestions inbuilt in the MOU. The acrimonious process has already started. We have Marco Rubio opening his mouth and having one stupidity after another about the international status of the Strait of Hormuz. There are no international waters in the Strait of Hormuz. It's Iran in the north, Oman in the south. That's it, according to international law. So we know that this thing will derail all over the spectrum, right? So Iran has no illusions about it. And of course, they have the finger on the trigger. And this goes to everything. This goes to any American adventure that could happen within the next few weeks or months. And of course, if Israel does not abandon the attacks on Lebanon, there will be a very harsh response. And so far, as we know, coming from everybody speaking for the death cult, they are continuing to attack Lebanon, southern Lebanon. For the moment, not Beirut, but for the moment. But southern Lebanon, they continue to attack it. They continue to kill civilians. They continue to raze villages to the ground. Nothing has changed.
Pepe, two important incidents, or one of them was the reports that the Pakistani intelligence believed that Mossad wanted to assassinate Asim Munir.
Yes.
One of them. And the other one was what has happened in Qatar, because these two countries were so important in the summit. They were mediating the two sides
Of
between.
course.
So we had a huge explosion in Qatar, which was
Explosion in Ras Lafan, exactly. It was not anywhere else. It was in the most important gas node in Qatar. So this has all the markings of a false flag. All the
the
markings.
Iranian. By the way, Iranian intelligence believed that it was Israel.
Absolutely.
This is
Look, okay.
understanding on the point.
I was going to say absolute, but not absolutely correct. But this is the absolute number one scenario to consider.
Mm, yeah.
Of course, there's no evidence so far,
Because they
but
said it was a technical issue. Technical issue doesn't go that far. A huge explosion happening.
huge explosion. So it was not a technical issue, and obviously the Qataris have to be very, very careful. They cannot accuse Israel point blank, because then they're going to be attacked again. And of course, they are trying to coordinate not only with Iran, but also Pakistan has a say in all that. If it's proven that it's Israel, how they're going to respond. But no question, this has all the markings of a false flag. Number one. Number two, and for that, obviously, Larry and myself, we got killed over and over. We were serially killed all across the spectrum, because basically we were telling our audience and the audience of all of you who have very successful shows that Pakistani military intel had a very credible scenario that they uncovered, according to which, under orders of Netanyahu, there would have been an attempt to assassinate Field General Asim Munir. So, this is the information that we received. It's not that Larry and I, one day drinking vodka online, we decided to come up with that. So, people who criticizes without knowing how these things work, they're not even fools. They're beyond stupid. Number one. Number two, Pakistani military, and obviously when we heard that, we were both like, wow. So could you please ask this? We told one of our connectors, in fact, could you please ask this source once again, is this absolutely credible? Was this uncovered? Was this ready to go, etc.? I said, look, my information is surefire. It was uncovered, and they sent a message via the proverbial mediators. It could have been, this was not specified, but it could have been Oman, for instance, which is relatively neutral. Or it could have been via Turkey, for instance, to Tel Aviv. If you touch our delegation going to Switzerland, and especially if you touch Field Marshal Asim Munir, we're going to wipe you off the map. Guess what happened immediately afterwards? Nothing. So apparently, Tel Aviv, they got the message. So, this, once again, if you put this all together, Pakistan and Israel, they are fighting a proxy war already for all practical purposes. So, we hear this rhetoric coming from the decals about our next enemies are going to be Turkey, and that kind of bullshit. No. And Pakistan has already relayed to the Israelis, look, we have our eyes are on you. So you better start behaving, or at least not behaving in the usual animalistic way that you do, because otherwise you're going to have to pay a price. So we have two in a row. We have the intel, the techno intel that they supplied to Iran to stop with the Israeli assassinations of Iranian leadership. And on top of it, Pakistani military intel uncovered this plot to kill Munir, or maybe other members, or if not the whole Pakistani delegation. So this is something that is going to evolve very, very fast, and it's something that we should all be paying enormous attention, especially when we link the Pakistani Saudi relationship, and now the possibility that this security umbrella that Pakistan and Saudi Arabia are trying to organize for West Asia, especially for Saudi, but for the rest of West Asia, possibly, with participation from the GCC, with participation from Egypt. Turkey is a very complicated case once again. So then we're going to have uh, the definition Muslim NATO is not appropriate, but we're going to have a very close alignment of four or five very influential and powerful Sunni nations. And obviously, the death cult would be very wise not to mess with them, especially because Pakistan is a nuclear power. So this is where things are going on one side, Nima. On the other side is, will the Zionist axis or the Epstein syndicate in the next few weeks and months, what kind of radical play they will be willing, what which way would they be willing to go or risk to go not only against Iran but against Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. So anything they do in terms of subverting the MOU and the possibility of Iran and GCC having a relationship that holds, they would be going against Iran, against Pakistan, against the Pakistan Saudi Arabia connection, and against China, which is right behind supporting it all. So now we have the two camps clearly defined, and it's getting more and more volatile by the minute. Because we know, Nima, you know, our audience knows, the Zionists will never give up. They will never give up. They will never give up on Lebanon. They'll never give up on Syria. They will never, well, obviously, Gaza and the West Bank, we all know what is already happening. And they will never give up on Iran. And they'll never give up on expanding ad infinitum. And that includes everybody, includes stealing lands from Iraq, stealing lands from Saudi, you name it, from Jordan, you name it. They'll never stop. There's only one way to stop them. We all know which way it is. And Iran also knows which way it is. And there's no other way.
I think, Pepe, when we talk about the situation between Iran and the United States, and considering the recent meeting, I would assume that you have some information from your source in Pakistan on the visit of Iranian president to Pakistan, which was important. He basically brought up the concept of the new security this
You
new
exactly.
security architecture of the region,
Sure.
which is, he mentioned Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Qatar, and Pakistan as part of that security architecture. I assume that Pakistan, because they have good relationship with Saudi Arabia and they have good relationship with Iranians, and they can somehow facilitate the ongoing or somehow the negotiation or the talks among these countries. And
Sure.
what is their concept on that, and how far are we from achieving that sort of security architecture in the region?
Exactly. It comes back to the beginning of our conversation. Pezeshkian, as you saw it, he was received like a brother, like a super VIP guest, of course, with all the ceremony, all the pomp and circumstance, and all that, but mostly like a brother. And he has a very good relationship with both Sharif and with Munir as well. And he had a bilateral with Munir only to talk about security and defense, apart from all the political conversations with Sharif, with the government, etc. He had a special meeting with Munir only to discuss defense and security. So they were discussing what? The Pakistan, Saudi Arabia upgrading of their military pact, which, of course, from the Iranian point of view, they said, no problem, we trust you. And we trust China behind it. And the Chinese want this to work. And obviously, this is the next step in terms of having a security umbrella outside of the Americans. So all of you can imagine how is this freaking out the White House, the Pentagon, and the deep state as a whole. But this is the way things are going. If you look at Iran, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and China, this is the way it's going. So the smaller players will have to tag along. That's for sure. So once again, this started to the ball started to roll for good in the weekend in Burgenstock in Switzerland, and then it was speeding up only 2 days later on Tuesday and on Wednesday uh, in Islamabad with the visit of Pezeshkian. So it's all interconnected and very very fast. So fast that we still don't have any, I wouldn't say response, but even a comment coming from Washington about all that. They are terrified because this is happening in front of their eyes and there's nothing they can do to prevent it. What are they going to do? Bomb Saudi Arabia? Bomb Pakistan? you know, which is the only thing they know. Their modus operandi is bomb, bomb, bomb. We know that. So the rearrangement of the chessboard is already in progress, no question. So we have to expect the moves from the other side, even though they are dazed and confused, or some terrified and some helpless. But they will be deeply enraged, and it will add to what the strategic defeat of the war that they launched against Iran now has calcified. It calcified the beginning of a new security architecture for West Asia, where we have South Asia in the form of Pakistan as one of the most important players. And something that is extraordinary that I keep thinking about it because many of us were thinking that this process might start up north between Russia and the West. Going back to December 2021, when those letters sent by Putin to NATO and to the previous administration in the US, the letters were about indivisibility of security. Basically, the Kremlin was telling everybody, look, we should have security for everybody, for the US, for NATO, for Western Europe, for Eastern Europe, for the post-Soviet space, for Russia, for Central Asia, for all of us in across Eurasia. There was no response. The response from NATO was provoke Russia into the SMO in February 2022. So instead of this process starting up north, it's starting in West Asia. Because the deeper meaning of this new security umbrella provided by Pakistan to a great deal of West Asia is indivisibility of security. It's the same concept. And you have others who are not part of this umbrella, like Iran, which is sovereign and independent. They agree as long as it's not going to be an attacking platform against Iran. And it won't, because the mediator and the provider of the security umbrella, Pakistan, is actually mediating now between Iran and the US. So the roles have changed completely. And of course, it's very, very important that Pakistan now has this role in West Asia that they didn't have before. This changes the equation completely. That the Saudis are being very pragmatic and they know that they need an accommodation with Iran. That the Egyptians and the Turks, we still don't know to what extent. Basically, they agree with the new structure ahead, We still don't know the details, of course. And of course, Qatar, sooner or later, may get in. They're very tiny. They're going to need a security umbrella from somewhere. So the whole thing is changing in a matter of days. So it's no wonder, Nima, that we're getting this incoherent blah blah blahs coming from Washington all the time. They don't even they cannot even understand how big this is. First of all, because they live in a bubble. Second, they don't understand other cultures. They don't understand other ways of thinking. They don't respect other cultures and other ways of thinking. And this is happening practically in front of them. And they cannot even understand why. Why? Because they still cannot accept the fact that they were strategically defeated. Even if they sign a memorandum of understanding, which their president is desperate to have, because it's the only off ramp that he could find. He's already undermining the off ramp. He was undermining the MOU even before they started to talk in Switzerland this weekend. He continues to undermine the MOU virtually every day. So this will continue, right? And now we come to I would say, an immensely intriguing situation where probably it all depends on JD Vance for the MOU to go somewhere.
Mm.
Can you believe it?
Yeah.
That everybody on the table has to rely on JD Vance. He's the only guy who has a semblance of normality here. But we all know who's behind JD Vance.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
also, we all know about his presidential ambition. So it's a very, very, very dangerous game. The whole thing.
Pepe, we for many years in the United States are talking about pivot to China, pivot to the east,
Hmm.
and administration after administrations coming and making. Oh, the Biden administration created the war in Ukraine, and the Trump administration has a new war in the Middle East, in the West Asia against Iran. The war still has some sort of pause. We have two different players with different objectives, by the way. United States and Israel. Israel, the main agenda is the continuation of the war. The United States agenda is to get out of the war because they know there is nothing there anymore to stay there. This is going to be a recipe for disaster. The United States has experienced that before in Iraq and Afghanistan. So this is the same thing. It's even worse because as time goes by, they're going to be the fragility of their presence in this in the Persian Gulf would be somehow, you know, would be exposed by the because that's the region that Iran dominates militarily. So the
Yes.
United States staying there is a huge cost, by the way, for the United States geopolitically, militarily, and considering all of that difficulties they had during the war and have in during the ceasefire since the ceasefire was announced. This is the problem. But when it comes to pivot to China, don't you think that after the war in Ukraine, after or as we have this war between Iran and the United States, what does that mean? Pivot to China? Are they gonna go to create a bigger problem for themselves? Or maybe it's time to pivot to the United States itself, coming back to country, coming back to the principles, those mottos, those sort of arguments, rhetorics of Donald Trump. Make America great again, production, jobs back to America, production back to America. Because those things, if they go against China while having the two wars, by the way, the two wars are active, in my opinion, right now in Ukraine and
You're
in the West
absolutely right.
Asia.
Yes.
You-
Well, there's nothing they can do against China to start with. And that's why the Chinese are not exactly losing their sleep. It's what I was in China last month, in fact, May, May. I was still in China in May before I went to Russia. They were not losing their sleep, and they said, no, no, we are concentrating on our um, domestic challenges. Uh, in the tech race, which from the Chinese point of view, they're doing everything that they need to do. It's not a question of winning or losing, especially because the imperatives of the Chinese tech race have nothing to do with the American tech race, which is basically profit, Wall Street, and all that. In China, it's a completely different thing. It's in terms of modernization of China. By the way, the title of Xi Jinping's book, published last year, which I had the pleasure to read extensively while I was in Xinjiang. I was reading Xi Jinping's Modernization of China, and I was looking at the modernization of China in front of me everywhere I went in Xinjiang. So this is what they are worried about. There's a huge problem in Latin America, Nima. If you look at the map now, wow, the Americans are in control of almost everywhere.
Yeah.
And the last remaining big piece of the puzzle is Brazil. You know better than I do what could happen in the next elections, or what they could do to destabilize the Brazilian elections. So this is it. And this is in the National Security Doctrine. It's Monroe Doctrine 2.0. Our backyard is ours, and that's it. So this is it's terrifying, really. And of course, they can always come up with diversionist tactics here and there. But Greenland is going to go back on the screen sooner or later. And of course, there's nothing they can do in the South China Sea, especially. And Taiwan, the same thing. They know that if they try anything in Taiwan, the Chinese response is going to be very, very harsh against America, not against Taiwan. If something, of course, if some sort of aggression against China would come from Taiwan, which is something that will never happen, then it's a different story. But the Chinese know that the Americans are capable of producing a false flag in the South China Sea or in Taiwan itself. So that's an enormous problem and they still have to live with two strategic defeats in a row, in Ukraine and in Iran. So talk about a cornered animal. That's what it looks like, So they will be much more dangerous than they already are.
Obrigado, Pepe.
Obrigado a você, querido. Sorry, but I have to go. Muito obrigado.
Foi muito bom ver você e falar contigo.
Obrigado pela ajuda ao nosso canal. I'm thanking Nima for plugging our channel, and I hope all of you go to our channel. Our channel is a public service. Larry and I are doing this as a public service. If we have access to information of this caliber, we have to disseminate it. It's very, very simple, right? Mm-hmm. So thanks, everybody. Thank you, Nima, as usual. And here from NATO Stun at 40 degrees, it's not a very nice picture, I tell you.